Great to be with all of you today. I'm going to be talking about the new India and how digitalization, industrialization, and decentralization are reshaping a very old, ancient civilizational state. A bit about my background. I'm a venture investor, writer, and entrepreneur. I run the venture fund Navam Capital in India, and we invest in frontier tech startups. I've also written a well-received book on the history and future of modern India called A New Idea of India. So before we dig in, let's start with a history lesson. In the first 50 years of India's journey after independence in 1947, everyone knows India stagnated economically, could not make progress, and did not live up to its potential. The wounded civilization, as the author and thinker V.S. Naipaul described it, remained in a state of deep distress for the better part of the late 20th and early decades of its journey. But that was not always the case. India had a long history of being a major economic player in the world, and the toll of colonization, foreign rule, had impoverished the country. Even after independence, a number of wrong policy choices were made. The photo over here that you can see is, I think, emblematic of the mindset that pervaded the country for a long time. That's a photo of the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, who's reinforcing a certain stereotype about the country before Jackie Kennedy. So that's a snake charmer, and India was known as the land of snake charmers. So lo and behold, Nehru thought it fit to have a snake charmer kind of show for the US First Lady. And to really understand the morass that India found itself in, I would encourage you to read the book, A Wounded Civilization, India, A Wounded Civilization by V.S. Naipaul. So that was the state of affairs for a long time. Then in the 1990s, India saw a certain burst of economic freedom thanks to two prime ministers, P.V. Narasimha Rao and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So they came along and executed a range of transformational economic liberalization measures that unlocked India's potential. And for the first time in India's history, there was a major push to build hard infrastructure in the country, to enable telecom access and voice communications. So the vast geography of India and the large population of the country actually got connected for the first time probably in hundreds of years. You could travel across the country at a certain speed. You could pick up the phone and talk to family, do business, etc. relatively easily. This had never happened, and it was a true revolution. And it was on the back of those reforms that the India growth story that we all speak of today was foundationally set up. So the Indian economy hit a growth rate of over 8% in 2004 and hit $1 trillion in GDP by 2007. And since then, there's been a quadrupling. So India is now a 4 trillion GDP economy. And the reforms that were started then have been continued in the last decade. So whether it's the infrastructure push, whether it is a push to achieve mobile data expansion and making sure that it is a ubiquitous availability across the country, has been a major effort by the Modi government in the last 10 years. Once the first generation's reforms paid off, the question was what next? And that is where the theme of digitalization, industrialization, and decentralization comes in, which I believe are going to be transformational for India in the next 25 years. And as India proceeds on this path, we will see a shift from Naipaul's wounded civilization to a self-confident, great power nation state, which is a civilizational republic, the only one of its kind in the world. So let's talk about digitalization. So what does it mean to be digitalized? If you go back to 2015, the mobile data charges in the country, in India, were prohibitively expensive. It was essentially something only for the elites Smartphones were out of reach for the vast majority of the population. Something changed in 2016 due to introduction of competition in telecom sector, and the per gigabyte costs came down by over 95%, and the usage went up by over 100 times in the ensuing 6 years. And if you visited India before 2015 or more recently, you would see that Digital India is something which is highly visible across the country today and across every strata of society. So digitalization is how India is actually achieving its growth rate, and it is the principal impetus across government in the delivery of public services, across the private sector, as well as in social interactions. The second piece is how India is industrialized. So Indian manufacturing has got a major push because of primarily geo-economic and strategic reasons to reduce dependence on China. And manufacturing is no longer just about making low value-added, labor-intensive products, but India also wants to play in areas like smartphone production, chip development, electric vehicle manufacturing, and all kinds of engineered goods. So Make in India is not just about manufacturing, but it's also about design in India and inventing in India for IP-rich products and services. The second piece of industrialization is infrastructure. Now, if you study the build-out of infrastructure in the country prior to 2014 or 15 and look at the last decade, something has materially shifted. So how has India raised the velocity and increased the capacity in the country to build more and build faster? In fact, in certain areas, India is even building faster than China did in its expansion phase. This has been achieved because of the use of digital tools in government. So India has something called Gati Shakti, which literally translates as speed and power. And Gati Shakti is a tool to essentially map out which district in the country, which part of the country requires what kind of resource and infrastructure. And this is built at a union government level. And each ministry or department basically shares data into the system to get data out. And this kind of opt-in approach incentivizes people to share their information. And overall, it erases information asymmetries. It brings efficiency in construction. It eases the issuance of approvals and cuts down on time to delivery. So India has materially increased the rate at which it is building infra, and that is something which is unprecedented. Third, I want to talk about decentralization. So India has achieved a unique model where we are digitalizing, but we are eschewing the network monopolies that have consumed some of the Western economies. And this is done by embracing something called digital public infrastructure. So the DPI approach entails the creation of interoperable APIs that allow data to be shared based on certain set rules, like it would be in a protocol. And India has developed DPIs across categories, providing multiple types of solutions. And the most well-known example of this is in digital payments. So if you've ever visited India or if you've heard about this implementation of DPI in payments, you would know that it works at rapid speed. It's a bank-to-bank transfer without any intermediaries. And everyone from street vendors to enterprises to small-scale industries and startups, everyone uses UPI in India, which is an implementation of DPI. So while UPI is the best-known example of DPI, there are different modes of DPI across sectors. So India has DPIs for agriculture, for healthcare, for education, for e-commerce, and all of them are making progress at different paces. But the commitment of the government is very clear that it needs to be a protocol-based approach to build out digital platforms in the country. And if you remember, this is how the internet came to be. Initially, it used to be a protocol-driven approach before the emergence of walled gardens and closed networks. So this is, I believe, a unique contribution India has made to the digital sphere. So in summary, I believe there's a productivity Lollapalooza underway in the country where digitalization, industrialization, and decentralization are converging in a very, very special way to drive a productivity boom which human history has not seen before at this scale. And when we talk India scale, when we talk the population scale in the country, we are talking about 1.4 billion people, which is about a sixth of humanity. So achieving an impact at that scale requires innovation, requires creativity, and India is able to grow rapidly because we are doing things differently. We aren't just copying other models that worked elsewhere and implementing them, because that wouldn't scale for the size of India. So to experience this productivity Lollapalooza, I would encourage you to visit India, to invest in India, to do business there, and you would feel the difference. Thank you.